You wouldn't believe how far people can betray their own flesh and blood. And you wouldn't imagine how a woman who seemed to have lost everything would dare turn an inheritance court hearing into a battlefield that exposed an entire money laundering operation. This is a story about cold silence, trampled loyalty, and a counterstrike that made an entire courtroom hold its breath. The Maryland Superior Court smelled of old wood and desperation. I sat alone at the defendant's table, my hands folded precisely on the mahogany surface, watching my family arrange themselves like vultures across the aisle. My name is Harper Whitlow, and at 42, I'd spent 2 decades serving my country in military cyber intelligence. Now I was here, accused by my own blood of manipulating my dying father to steal an inheritance that was never mine to take. My mother sat rigid in her charcoal suit, the one I'd bought her 3 Christmases ago. She wouldn't meet my eyes, beside her. My younger brother Liam whispered urgently to his wife Celia, their heads bent together like conspirators, which, I suppose, they were. The courtroom filled with the shuffle of papers and clearing throats. Local reporters occupied the back rows, their phones ready to document the fall of a decorated veteran. That's what the headlines had been calling it for weeks. Former Defense Department specialist, accused of elder abuse. War hero, turns on family over money. They didn't know the half of it. Judge Morrison entered, her robe sweeping behind her like a storm cloud. The bailiff called us to order, and I remained seated while others rose, my military bearing intact even in civilian clothes. 20 years of service had taught me many things, but the most valuable lesson was patience. Wait, watch, strike when they least expect it. My lawyer, a nervous young man named Peters, fidgeted beside me. He'd wanted me to settle, to give them what they wanted and walk away. He didn't understand that some battles aren't about winning or losing, they're about truth. Across the aisle, Liam's attorney stood with theatrical confidence. Richard Brennan, the kind of lawyer who advertised on bus stops and promised aggressive representation. He straightened his tie and began outlining their case with practiced precision. According to him, I was unstable, isolated, and had used my technical expertise to digitally alter financial documents. I was, in his words, a threat to my grieving family's rightful inheritance. I let him talk, let him paint his picture of the cold, calculating daughter who'd abandoned her family for military service and returned only to plunder her father's estate. My fingers traced the edge of the leather briefcase at my feet. Inside lay a single sheet of paper that would change everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. They thought I was the enemy. They thought I'd spent too many years in intelligence work to remember what family meant. But they'd forgotten the other thing those years had taught me: how to recognize deception, how to follow money trails, and how to document everything. As Brennan continued his opening statement, I caught Celia glancing at me. Just for a second, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt. She looked away quickly, but I'd seen enough. She knew I knew. The question was whether she'd told Liam everything or kept some secrets for herself. Judge Morrison's gavel brought my attention back. She was addressing me directly now, asking if I understood the charges against me. I stood slowly, my voice clear and steady when I responded. I understand perfectly, Your Honor. And I did. I understood more than anyone in this room could imagine. I understood that sometimes the people you die for are the ones twisting the knife in your back. I understood that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Most importantly, I understood that in approximately 1 hour, federal agents would storm through those courthouse doors. But for now, I sat back down, placed my briefcase on the table, and waited. The show was just beginning. 6 months earlier, I'd stood in Arlington National Cemetery, watching them lower my father into the ground. The February wind cut through my dress uniform like accusations. He died alone in the VA hospital while I was stationed overseas, running cyber operations I still can't discuss. The guilt of that absence would follow me forever, but it was nothing compared to what I discovered afterward. The first sign came 3 days after the funeral. I was settling into a Arlington hotel room, sifting through Dad's paperwork, when an email notification popped up on my secure laptop. Strange. It was addressed to my father's veteran benefits account, confirming enrollment in a supplemental insurance program. Dad had been meticulous about his benefits. He wouldn't have signed up for anything new while battling stage 4 cancer. I dug deeper, accessing the account with credentials Dad had shared years ago for emergencies. What I found made my blood run cold. Monthly transfers of $3,000 starting 8 months before his death, flowing out to something called Silverline Holdings, LLC. The name triggered a memory. Liam at Thanksgiving, boasting about his new tech startup, how it was going to revolutionize veteran services. My fingers flew across the keyboard, old instincts kicking in. Silverline Holdings was registered in Delaware, that corporate haven where transparency goes to die. The registered agent was a law firm known for creating shell companies, but it was the signatory on the veteran benefits application that made my stomach turn. My mother's name, in handwriting that wasn't hers. I called her that night, choosing my words carefully. "Mom, I'm going through Dad's benefits paperwork. Did you help him sign up for any new programs last year?" Her pause told me everything. "Liam handled all that. You know how confused your father got with the medications. Liam handled Dad's VA benefits. He and Celia were so helpful. Harper, they were here. Where were you?" The accusation stung, but I pushed past it. "I need to see any paperwork they filed." "Why are you interrogating me? Your brother has been nothing but supportive, unlike some people who show up only when there's something to collect." She hung up. I stared at the hotel room wall, processing what I'd learned. My family wasn't just cold and resentful. They were stealing from the very system designed to support veterans like my father, and they were using my mother to do it. Over the next weeks, I pieced together the scheme. It was elegant in its simplicity. Liam and Celia had created a network of shell companies supposedly providing services to veterans. They'd enrolled dozens of benefits recipients, including my father, redirecting payments for services never rendered. The money flowed through multiple accounts before disappearing into crypto exchanges. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd gotten greedy. Instead of stopping at benefits fraud, they'd expanded into my father's investment accounts, his life insurance, even the equity in his house. Paper trails they thought were hidden behind digital walls I'd spent 20 years learning to breach. I documented everything meticulously: screenshots, transaction records, incorporation documents, each piece of evidence copied, encrypted, and stored in multiple secure locations. My training had taught me that intelligence without verification was just suspicion. I needed more. That's when I reached out to Cole Myers. We'd served together in a joint task force years ago, back when cyber warfare was still a new frontier. He'd retired to private consulting but maintained contacts throughout the intelligence community. When I showed him what I'd found, he whistled low. "Harper, this isn't just benefits fraud. These transaction patterns, the international movements, this looks like money laundering. How deep do you think it goes?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Cole studied me with those sharp eyes that had spotted terrorist financing networks across 3 continents. "You realize if you're right, this isn't just about your family anymore. This is federal crime territory." I nodded. Some part of me had known from the beginning this was bigger than family betrayal. But knowing and accepting are different things. My brother wasn't just a disappointment or a small-time crook. He was a criminal, and he'd dragged our grieving mother into his web. "Be careful," Cole warned as I left his office. "People who run operations like this don't like loose ends. And right now, you're looking like a very loose end." Working from my Spartan apartment in Bethesda, I transformed my living room into a command center. Whiteboards covered the walls, mapped with financial flows and corporate structures. It looked like something out of my old skiff at Fort Meade, minus the classification stamps. Every lead spawned 3 more. Silverline Holdings was just the tip. There was Patriot Services International, Veterans First Financial, Liberty Care Associates. Each company had the same pattern: minimal web presence, registered agents in different states, and bank accounts that moved money faster than a street dealer. The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. I'd been tracking cryptocurrency transactions when I noticed something odd. Small amounts, always under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting requirements, were being converted back to fiat currency and deposited into a charity account. The charity's name made me stop cold. Celia's Haven, a supposed nonprofit supporting military families. My sister-in-law ran a fake charity. Of course she did. I pulled Celia's Haven's tax filings. On paper, it looked legitimate. Fundraising events, donor lists, even photos of smiling veterans at charity galas. But the accounting told a different story. 90% of donations went to administrative costs and program development. The remaining 10% bought just enough legitimacy to avoid scrutiny. But here's where Liam and Celia got clever, or thought they did. The charity wasn't just washing stolen benefits money, it was receiving legitimate donations from corporations looking for tax write-offs. Those funds mixed with the dirty money, creating a pipeline that would take forensic accountants months to untangle. Unless, of course, you had the encryption keys to their email servers, which I did, thanks to Celia's predictable password habits and a spear phishing campaign that would have made my old unit proud. Their emails painted an ugly picture. Liam was the operations guy, managing the shell companies and benefit enrollments. Celia handled the charity side, schmoozing donors and maintaining their legitimate front. They'd recruited 2 VA employees with gambling debts, a benefits counselor drowning in student loans, and a desperate widow who thought she was helping other veterans. But the worst discovery was my mother's involvement. She wasn't just a passive victim. Email threads showed her actively participating, signing documents, attending charity board meetings. Whether she understood the criminal implications or not, she was neck-deep in the conspiracy. One email thread particularly caught my attention, dated 3 weeks before my father's death. Celia wrote to an unknown recipient, "The old man's condition is deteriorating faster than expected. H is still deployed. Move up the timeline for the insurance policies. M will sign anything we put in front of her now." H was me. M was Mom. The old man was my dying father. I had to step away from the computer after reading that. 20 years of seeing humanity's worst in intelligence work, and somehow this hit different. This was personal betrayal wrapped in calculated cruelty. Cole helped me understand the international dimension. The cryptocurrency conversions weren't random. The money was flowing through exchanges in Estonia, Malta, and Cyprus, before landing in accounts controlled by Eastern European crime syndicates. My brother hadn't just stolen from veterans. He'd gotten into bed with organizations that trafficked weapons and people. "This is way above local law enforcement," Cole said during one of our secure calls. "You need federal involvement, FBI, maybe Treasury's FinCEN." "Not yet," I replied. "They'll move too fast, make too much noise. Liam will rabbit, and the whole network stays intact minus a few sacrificial lambs." "Then what's your play?" I looked at my wall of evidence. "I'm going to let them come after me. Let them think they're winning. And when they're most confident, when they put all their cards on the table in open court, that's when I show mine." It was a risk, but I'd learned long ago that the best operations were the ones where your enemy defeated themselves. Liam thought he was smart, using our family tragedy to build his criminal empire, but he'd forgotten who his sister was, what I did for a living, and most importantly, he'd forgotten that I'd been trained by the best to take down operations exactly like his. The drive to my mother's house in Rockville took 30 minutes but felt like a lifetime. Every mile was a memory. The strip mall where Liam broke his arm trying to skateboard, the high school where I'd graduated valedictorian before enlisting, the park where Dad taught us both to ride bikes, back when we were still a real family. Mom's Colonial looked exactly as it had for 30 years, except for the new Mercedes in the driveway, $60,000 worth of German engineering, paid for with stolen benefits. I parked my 10-year-old Honda behind it and sat for a moment, gathering strength. She answered the door in her housecoat, surprise flashing across her face before settling into cold disapproval. "Harper, you should have called." "We need to talk, Mom." "I have nothing to say to you. My lawyer says." "Your lawyer is being paid with stolen money." I pushed past her into the house. The living room had new furniture, a massive flat-screen TV, artwork I didn't recognize. All of it screamed recent wealth. She followed me, indignant. "How dare you barge in here making accusations, after everything you've put this family through?" "What I've put you through?" I turned to face her, struggling to keep my voice level. "I served my country for 20 years. I sent money home every month. I paid off this house when Dad lost his job. And you're acting like I'm the villain." "You abandoned us." The words exploded from her like shrapnel. 20 years of missed birthdays, holidays, family gatherings. Your father died asking for you. And where were you? Some classified location you couldn't even name. Liam was here. Liam held my hand at the hospital. Liam arranged the funeral while you were playing soldier. The accusations hit precisely where she'd aimed them, but I'd interrogated too many suspects to let emotion override mission focus. I pulled out my tablet, showing her the documentation I'd prepared: bank statements, transfer records, the forged signatures. "Look at this. Mom, really look. This is Dad's benefits account. See these transfers? That's money meant for his medical care going to Liam's fake companies." She wouldn't look. "I don't understand all that computer nonsense." "You understand enough to sign these documents." I showed her the charity board minutes. "You're listed as secretary for Celia's Haven. You signed off on expenditures. You attended meetings where they discussed maximizing revenue streams from veteran enrollments." Her face crumbled slightly, but she recovered. "It's a legitimate charity. Celia works so hard helping military families. Celia's washing money for Eastern European crime syndicates." "You're being ridiculous. You always were jealous of your brother's success." I laughed, bitter and short. "Success. He's a criminal, Mom, and he's made you one too. Get out." Her voice was quiet now, dangerous. "Get out of my house." I gathered my tablet, pausing at the living room door. On the mantel sat a photo from better times: Dad in his army dress uniform, Mom radiant beside him, Liam and me as kids grinning at the camera. We'd been happy once. "I tried to protect you," I said softly. "When the FBI comes, and they will come, remember that I tried." She turned her back, staring out the window at her manicured yard. "You always thought you were better than us, smarter, more righteous, but you're just a lonely woman who chose her job over her family. Liam takes care of me. That's more than you ever did." I left the house with those words echoing. The drive back was blur of streetlights and suppressed rage. Not at her, exactly, at the situation, at Liam for corrupting her grief, at myself for being overseas when the cancer took hold, for missing the signs that my family was fracturing beyond repair. Back in my apartment, I stood before my bathroom mirror, still in the clothes that smelled like my childhood home. The face staring back looked older than 42. Gray streaked through hair once regulation black. Lines mapped years of stress and desert sun, but the eyes remained sharp, focused. The mission wasn't over. "They don't think you'll do anything," I told my reflection. "They think you'll fold, pay them off, disappear back to whatever classified hole you crawled from. They're wrong." I'd given my mother one last chance to choose truth over comfortable lies. She'd made her decision. Now I'd make mine. The evidence was solid. The FBI contact Cole had provided was ready to move. All that remained was letting Liam and Celia think they'd won, letting them get comfortable enough to make the fatal mistake every criminal makes: overconfidence. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Back off, or things get messy." Attached was a photo of my apartment building taken from across the street, a not-so-subtle threat from my loving brother. I deleted the message and went to make coffee. If they wanted to play intimidation games, they'd chosen the wrong opponent. I'd faced down terrorist cells and nation-state hackers. A couple of amateur criminals with delusions of grandeur didn't even register on my threat matrix. The war was coming, but it would be fought on my terms, in my chosen battlefield. And despite what my mother believed, I hadn't forgotten what family meant. I just had a different definition. Family meant the veterans whose benefits were being stolen. Family meant the legitimate donors being defrauded. Family meant the oath I'd sworn to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic, even when domestic meant blood. The media assassination began 2 weeks after my mother threw me out. "Unstable veteran threatens family over inheritance" ran in the local paper, complete with an old photo from my deployment where exhaustion made me look half-crazed. The article quoted family sources expressing concern about my mental state, my isolation, my obsession with conspiracy theories. Liam had hired a PR firm. Of course he had. By the third article, I'd become a caricature, the bitter military woman who'd sacrificed family for career, and now wanted to steal her deceased father's legacy from the siblings who'd actually been present. They even found a psychologist to speculate about PTSD and paranoid tendencies in female veterans. Never mind that he'd never examined me or that my service record was exemplary. My former commanding officer called after the 5th hit piece. "Whitlow, what kind of shitstorm have you stepped in?" "The kind that involves family, sir." Colonel Richards had known me for 15 years. He didn't buy the media narrative, but he had concerns. Is any of this going to blow back on the unit on current operations? Negative, sir. This is entirely civilian side, personal matter. Keep it that way. And Harper, watch your six. Seen too many good soldiers taken down by bad families. The calls from old friends dwindled. The veterans organization I'd volunteered with suggested I take a temporary break from activities. Even my neighbors in the apartment building started avoiding eye contact. Liam's PR campaign was working exactly as intended. Isolate the target, destroy credibility, make any future accusations seem like desperate revenge fantasies. But while Liam focused on winning the media war, I was building something more substantial. My lawyer, Peters, had been replaced by someone with actual spine. Sarah Chen came recommended by Cole, a former JAG officer who'd transitioned to financial crimes prosecution before going private practice. Your brother's made a critical error, she said during our first meeting, reviewing my evidence. He's conflating public opinion with legal standing. Courts don't care about newspaper headlines. They care about documentation, and you have mountains of it. Sarah understood the game better than Peters ever could. While Liam's team filed motion after motion trying to force a quick settlement, she played defensive, letting them exhaust resources and reveal strategy. Every filing they made exposed more of their network, more connections we could trace. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Celia, getting nervous as federal scrutiny increased, had started moving money faster. In her haste, she'd used a charity credit card for personal expenses, $5,000 at a luxury spa, $8,000 for jewelry, small amounts compared to their overall theft, but clean, traceable crimes that even a local prosecutor could understand. It's enough for a warrant, Sarah explained. Once authorities start pulling financial records for the charity, they'll find the rest. But timing is everything. File too early, and they'll claim it's retaliation for the inheritance dispute. We need them to make the first aggressive move. That move came sooner than expected. I'd noticed surveillance on my apartment for days. Nothing professional, just hired muscle in cheap suits sitting in cars, following me to the grocery store. I documented everything. Of course, photos, timestamps, license plates, all forwarded to the FBI liaison Cole had connected me with. Then came the night they crossed the line. I'd been at Sarah's office until midnight, preparing for the inevitable court battle. The apartment hallway was dark when I returned, the overhead light conveniently broken. My hand went instinctively to my hip, reaching for a sidearm I no longer carried. 20 years of training doesn't just disappear. The door to my apartment was cracked open, not forced, picked clean, professional work. I backed away, pulling out my phone to call 911 when footsteps sounded from inside, 3 sets, moving through my rooms with purpose. I melted into the stairwell shadows, utilizing skills I'd hoped to leave in Afghanistan. From my position, I could see them exit. 3 men, latex gloves, carrying my laptop and external drives, or what they thought were my drives. The real data lived on encrypted cloud servers with military-grade protection. What they'd stolen were honeypots, tracking devices disguised as storage media. After they left, I entered my violated space. They'd been thorough but careful. Nothing destroyed, just searched. They'd even replaced items almost exactly where they'd been, almost. But I'd spent years learning to spot disturbances and patterns, anomalies that revealed enemy action. I called Sarah first, then the police. The report would create an official record, even if local cops wouldn't find anything. The real value was in the digital breadcrumbs my honeypot devices were leaving as the thieves connected them to their systems. Within hours, I had IP addresses, network maps, and most importantly, direct connections to Liam's operation. They just handed us probable cause on a silver platter, the FBI liaison said when I shared the data. Breaking and entering, theft of electronic devices, conspiracy. Your brother just graduated from white-collar crime to felony territory. But I held them back. Not yet. The inheritance case was scheduled for the following month. Let Liam think his intimidation had worked. Let him believe I was scrambling, defenseless, my evidence stolen. Let him walk into that courtroom confident of victory. Meanwhile, I kept building. More financial traces, more international connections. A money laundering operation that had grown from stealing veteran benefits to washing millions for organizations involved in human trafficking and arms dealing. My brother had built an empire on the suffering of those who'd served. Soon, that empire would fall. Sarah warned me about the personal cost. Even when you win, and you will win, your family relationships will be destroyed. I thought of my mother's cold eyes, Liam's smirking face in the newspaper photos, my father's grave in Arlington. They're already destroyed. This is about justice now, for Dad, for the veterans they robbed, for everyone they hurt thinking blood would protect them. She nodded, understanding. Some bridges, once burned, light the way forward. The escalation was predictable. Criminals facing exposure always resort to violence when other tactics fail. What surprised me was how quickly Liam abandoned subtlety. The first direct threat came via email, routed through anonymous servers but carrying his digital fingerprints for anyone trained to look. Final warning: drop the case, disappear, or disappear permanently. Attached were photos me at the grocery store, at the gym, entering Sarah's office. The message was clear: we're watching, we can reach you. I forwarded everything to my FBI contact and kept my routine. Let them watch. Let them see a woman going through motions, defeated by family betrayal and public shame. Meanwhile, every surveillance photo they took was being captured by counter-surveillance I'd arranged through Cole's contacts. We were building a neat package of stalking and intimidation charges. The second escalation came through Mom. She called at 2 a.m., sobbing. "Harper, what have you done? Liam says people are following him, federal agents asking questions at his work. You're destroying your own brother." He destroyed himself the moment he stole from veterans. He made some mistakes, but... Mistakes, Mom. He's laundering money for human traffickers. Silence, then quieter. "I don't believe you. You always exaggerated things, made everything seem worse than it was." "The FBI believes me. That's all that matters now." She hung up. It was our last conversation before everything exploded. Celia cracked first. The pressure of federal investigation, combined with her reckless spending habits, created a perfect storm of paranoia. She started making mistakes, moving money in large chunks, communicating with criminal contacts on unsecured lines. Most damaging, she began creating exit strategies that didn't include Liam. I knew because I was reading their communications in real time. The honeypot devices had given us backdoor access to their entire network. Watching their partnership dissolve was like observing rats on a sinking ship. Each blamed the other, each prepared to flip for immunity. Neither realized how thoroughly documented their crimes were. The night before the court date, they made their final play. I'd moved to a hotel under an assumed name, but they found me anyway, not surprising. Given their VA insider access to databases, what was surprising was their desperation. No more hired muscle. Liam came himself. I watched through the hotel security feed on my phone as he argued with the night clerk, demanding my room number. When that failed, he tried bribing, then threatening. The clerk, a veteran himself who I'd specifically chosen this hotel to find, calmly called the police. But Liam didn't wait for them. He stormed out, and I tracked him on security cameras to the parking garage, to my rental car. I watched him place something under the wheel, a tracking device, a bomb. I called the FBI immediately. Within an hour, the hotel was swarming with federal agents and bomb squad personnel. The device was a tracker with an integrated incendiary, not enough to kill, probably, but enough to destroy a vehicle and anyone inside, enough to send a message. They arrested Liam in his apartment at dawn. Celia tried to run, making it as far as Dulles Airport before TSA, alerted by federal warrant, detained her at security, the VA employees, the benefits counselor, the widow who'd thought she was helping, all rounded up in coordinated raids. My mother they left alone, for now, professional courtesy to me, or perhaps recognition that she was more victim than perpetrator. I didn't ask and they didn't clarify. Sarah called as I dressed for court. "Harper, given the arrests, we could petition for postponement. The inheritance issue seems moot now." "No, I want to finish this, in open court, on record." She didn't argue. She understood this wasn't about money or property anymore. It was about truth. About standing in front of the world and refusing to be silenced by blood or threats or public shame. I'd started this journey trying to understand unusual transactions in my father's accounts. I'd discovered a criminal enterprise built on exploiting those who'd served. But more than that, I'd discovered the price of willful blindness, the cost of choosing comfortable lies over difficult truths. The FBI liaison met me at the courthouse steps. "Your brother's looking at 25 to life. Celia might get 15 if she cooperates. The whole network is unraveling." I nodded, feeling nothing, no satisfaction, no vindication, just empty resolution. And the stolen benefits? Being traced and returned, hundreds of veterans will get restitution. Your documentation made it possible. We climbed the courthouse steps together. Inside, the courtroom that had been prepared for my public crucifixion would instead become the stage for truth. Liam's lawyer, the theatrical Brennan, was notably absent. In his place sat a harried public defender, scrambling to understand why his client was in federal custody. Mom sat alone in the gallery, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. When our eyes met, I saw the moment reality finally broke through her denial. Her son in handcuffs, her daughter-in-law under arrest, her house, cars, and luxuries soon to be seized as proceeds of crime. And me, the daughter she'd cast out, standing with federal agents, preparing to detail the crimes she'd refused to see. I wondered if she finally understood that sometimes love means stopping those we care about from destroying themselves and others. Sometimes protection looks like prosecution. But that was a conversation for another day. If ever, right now, I had testimony to give, truth to speak, justice to serve. Judge Morrison called the courtroom to order at exactly 9 a.m. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically from that first hearing weeks ago, where once hostile family filled the plaintiff's table. Now only a confused public defender sat, frantically texting someone, anyone, who could explain why his client was in federal custody. I sat with Sarah, calm in the eye of the storm. The briefcase at my feet contained a single sheet of paper, but the weight of it seemed to anchor me to the moment. Everything had led to this. "Your Honor," the public defender began, clearly out of his depth. "I've just been informed of developments in this case. I move for an immediate postponement until I can adequately—" "Counselor," Judge Morrison interrupted. "Federal marshals are currently standing in my courthouse. I've received notification from the FBI regarding arrests made this morning. Would someone care to explain what's happening in my courtroom?" Sarah stood. "Your Honor, if I may, the inheritance dispute that brought us here today has revealed something far more serious. Ms. Whitlow has uncovered evidence of extensive financial crimes perpetrated by the plaintiffs. We're prepared to present documentation that will clarify everything." The judge's eyes narrowed. "This sounds like a matter for federal court. Ms. Chen?" "Indeed it is, Your Honor. However, Ms. Whitlow insists on entering certain evidence into this court's record first. One document, specifically." I stood, reaching for my briefcase. The click of the locks echoed in the silent courtroom. From inside, I withdrew the single sheet that had started everything, not the financial records, not the communication intercepts, not the international money transfers, just one piece of paper. "Your Honor," I said, my voice carrying the weight of 20 years of service, "I'd like to submit into evidence my father's final letter to me." Confusion rippled through the room. Even Sarah looked surprised. This wasn't what we'd discussed, but I'd learned long ago that the most powerful weapons were often the most unexpected. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "Proceed." I handed the letter to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. As she read, I watched her expression change from curiosity to concern to something approaching anger. "Ms. Whitlow," she said finally, "this letter is dated 6 months before your father's death. In it, he expresses concern about unusual financial activities and asks you to investigate when you return from deployment. Is this accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor. My father was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He knew something was wrong. He knew he was being manipulated, and he knew I had the skills to uncover the truth." Objection. The public defender found his voice. "This is hearsay, prejudicial." Overruled. Judge Morrison's tone could have frozen helium. "Continue, Ms. Whitlow." "My father asked me to protect the family legacy, not money or property, but honor. The knowledge that the Whitlow name stood for service, integrity, sacrifice, in trying to fulfill that request. I discovered my brother and sister-in-law had built a criminal enterprise stealing from veterans and laundering money for international crime syndicates. I turned to look at my mother. Tears streamed down her face, but she was listening. Finally listening. The federal agents you see here today aren't here for me. Your Honor, they're here because the evidence I've compiled revealed crimes affecting hundreds of veterans across multiple states. Crimes that started with stealing my dying father's benefits and metastasized into an international money laundering operation. Judge Morrison studied the letter again. This document references specific account numbers and transactions. Ms. Whitlow, are you telling me your father documented his own victimization? He tried to, Your Honor, despite the cancer, despite the medication, he knew something was wrong, but he was too weak to stop it alone, so he wrote to the one person he knew would pursue the truth regardless of personal cost. Your client, the judge addressed the public defender, is currently in federal custody. Yes, Your Honor, along with several co-conspirators. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, rubbing her temples. In 30 years on the bench, I've never seen an inheritance dispute reveal federal crimes of this magnitude. She looked directly at me. Ms. Whitlow, what are you asking this court to do? Sarah started to speak, but I raised my hand slightly. This was my moment. Your Honor, I'm asking this court to enter into record that I, Harper Whitlow, acted not out of greed or mental instability as alleged, but in fulfillment of my father's dying wish to protect his legacy and fellow veterans. I want the record to show that sometimes the greatest act of family loyalty is refusing to enable criminal behavior, even when that refusal costs you everything. The courtroom held its breath. In the gallery, my mother had buried her face in her hands. The reporters were scribbling furiously. The federal agents stood at attention, ready for whatever came next. Judge Morrison spoke slowly, deliberately. Ms. Whitlow, this court finds no evidence of mental instability or improper behavior on your part regarding your father's estate. To the contrary, the evidence suggests you've performed a considerable service to your community and nation by exposing these crimes. She turned to the public defender. As for your clients, I recommend you advise them to cooperate fully with federal authorities. The charges they're facing make this inheritance dispute irrelevant. This court is prepared to... The courtroom doors burst open. Federal agents swept in with the controlled chaos of a well-planned operation. One approached the bench, handing Judge Morrison a sealed document. She read it, her face paling. Ladies and gentlemen, this court is now sealed by federal order. No one leaves until cleared by the FBI. Phones appeared in hands, recording everything. Tomorrow, those videos would be everywhere. The decorated veteran who'd exposed her own family's crimes. The daughter who'd chosen justice over blood. The soldier who'd won her final battle not with weapons, but with truth. As agents began processing the scene, I felt a hand on my shoulder. The FBI liaison leaned close. The letter was a nice touch. Your father would be proud. I looked at the single sheet of paper that had started everything. Dad's shaky handwriting, his plea for justice, his trust that I'd do what was right regardless of cost. He knew, I said quietly. Somehow, he knew it would come to this. The liaison nodded. Family isn't always who we're born to. Whitlow, sometimes it's who we choose to protect. As federal agents secured the courtroom and began taking statements, I noticed my mother being escorted to a private room. Not arrested, just isolated for questioning. Our eyes met across the chaos. In hers, I saw the dawning realization of how thoroughly she'd been deceived. In mine, she might have seen pity, but not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The courthouse steps were chaos. Reporters thrust microphones at me like weapons while cameras captured every angle of my exit. Behind me, federal agents processed the scene that had transformed from inheritance dispute to criminal takedown in minutes. Whitlow. How does it feel to turn in your own family? Harper. Did you know from the beginning how deep this went? Will you be testifying at the federal trial? I walked through them like they were ghosts, saying nothing. Sarah flanked my right, the FBI liaison on my left. creating a protective corridor through the media storm. 20 years of military bearing served me well. Back straight, eyes forward, no visible emotion. Let them interpret silence however they wanted. The SUV waited at the curb, engine running. As we pulled away, I watched the courthouse shrink in the rear window. Inside that building, my brother sat in federal custody, facing decades in prison. His wife was already negotiating a plea deal. My mother was learning the true cost of willful blindness, and I was driving away with nothing but the satisfaction of a mission completed. "The Attorney General wants to thank you personally," the FBI liaison said. "What you've done here, the veterans you've protected." "No thanks necessary," I cut him off. "Just make sure the stolen benefits get returned. Every penny." He nodded. "Already in motion. We've identified over 300 victims across 7 states. Full restitution, plus interest. 300 families who'd trusted the system and been betrayed. 300 veterans who'd served their country only to be robbed by those claiming to help them. The numbers should have made me feel vindicated. Instead, they just made me tired." Sarah's phone buzzed constantly. Interview requests, book deals, movie rights. Everyone wanted the story of the cyber specialist who'd brought down her own family. She showed me one offer that made my eyes water. 7 figures for exclusive rights. "Not interested?" I said. "Harper, think about it. You've lost your family, your privacy, probably your next job given the publicity. This could set you up." I said no. She nodded, understanding. This had never been about money. We drove in silence through Maryland's suburbs that held too many memories, past the high school where Liam had been homecoming king, past the church where my parents had renewed their vows on their 25th anniversary, past the VA hospital where Dad had died, asking for the daughter deployed overseas. The FBI liaison's phone rang. He listened, his face darkening. "Understood. We'll handle it." "What now?" I asked. "Your sister-in-law just gave us information about the international connections. The Estonian link we suspected, it's bigger than we thought. This could implicate—" "I don't want to know." The words came out harsher than intended. "My part's done. I found the crimes, documented the evidence, testified in court. The rest is your job." He studied me. "You know there'll be federal trials. Your testimony will be crucial. Then subpoena me, but don't expect enthusiasm." The SUV pulled up to my apartment building. Same building where intruders had searched for evidence they'd never understand. Same building where I'd mapped financial crimes on whiteboards like battle plans. It didn't feel like home anymore. Nowhere did. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked as I gathered my briefcase. I thought about it. My military career was over. Too much publicity for the kind of work I did. My family was destroyed. Even if Mom avoided prosecution, we'd never recover from this. My anonymity was blown. My face would be on every news cycle for weeks. "Disappear," I said finally. "Find somewhere quiet. Maybe teach. Maybe write code. Maybe just exist without missions or betrayals or family drama." "Harper." "It's done. Sarah, we won. They lost. Justice served. End of story." But it wasn't, of course. Stories like this don't end with courthouse victories. They echo through years of empty holidays, silent phones, and the peculiar loneliness of being right when everyone wanted you to be wrong. I entered my apartment to find it exactly as I'd left it that morning. Coffee cup in the sink, whiteboard still covered with financial flows that no longer mattered. On the mantel, that same family photo from happier times. I picked it up, studying faces I'd never see again outside of federal courtrooms. My secure phone buzzed. Cole, checking in. "Saw the news? You okay?" Define okay. "Alive, free, not under federal indictment." "Then I'm okay." He paused. "I know a place, cabin in Montana, quiet, isolated. Owner owes me favors. It's yours if you want it." Montana. About as far from Maryland as I could get without leaving the country. No family, no memories, no reminders of the war I just won at the cost of everything else. "Send me details," I said. That night, I burned the whiteboard's contents in the apartment complex's barbecue area, watched months of evidence turn to ash and drift away on winter wind. The FBI had digital copies of everything. I didn't need monuments to my family's betrayal. Inside, I packed light. 2 decades of military life had taught me the value of mobility. Clothes, laptop, a few books, the family photo I left on the mantel. Let the next tenant wonder about the woman who'd lived here, surrounded by financial crimes and family photos. As I carried boxes to my car, Mrs. Chen from 3B stopped me. "Harper, I saw the news. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen." "Where will you go?" "Somewhere quiet." She touched my arm gently. "Sometimes winning feels like losing, but you did the right thing." I managed a smile. "Thank you." "My grandson. He's a veteran. If what they're saying is true, what your family did." She shook her head. "You're a hero. Harper Whitlow." Hero, the word sat heavy as I drove away from Maryland for the last time. Heroes in stories got parades and happy endings. They reunited with loved ones and rebuilt better lives. They didn't drive alone toward empty horizons, carrying the weight of necessary betrayals. But this wasn't a story. This was real life, where doing right came with prices that never appeared on invoices, where justice and happiness rarely shared the same space, where families could become enemies and duty could destroy everything you'd once held dear. My phone rang as I crossed into Pennsylvania. Mom's number. I let it go to voicemail, then deleted without listening. Some words didn't need hearing. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay ash. The highway stretched ahead, pointing toward whatever came after winning a war nobody wanted fought. I'd exposed the truth, protected the innocent, served justice. The fact that victory tasted like ashes didn't make it less necessary. In the rearview mirror, Maryland disappeared into darkness. Ahead lay Montana and silence and the peculiar peace of having nothing left to lose. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was an ending, and sometimes, that's the best a soldier can hope for. The truth had set everyone free, free to face consequences, free from illusions, free from the toxic bonds of corrupted blood, and me, free to disappear into the vast American landscape, carrying scars that would never heal from a war that should never have been necessary. I drove through the night, toward mountains and solitude, and the strange comfort of earned isolation. Behind me, my family faced their reckoning. Ahead, I faced mine, the price of choosing justice over blood, duty over family, truth over comfortable lies. It was a cold victory on a cold night, driving toward a cold future, but it was victory nonetheless, and in the end, that would have to be enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious, where are you tuning in from today? Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're listening from. I love connecting with listeners from around the world. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts about Harper's journey. What would you have done in her position? Your perspectives make these stories richer for everyone. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.